Tom, so good to have you here. Really excited to talk to you today. We could just start with you telling us a little bit about your journey and how you got here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ty. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me, of course. For everyone else, I'm Tom Hewitt, Vice President of Partnerships at Ceros. Um, I've been at the company now just over a year, pushing a year and a half. My journey here is certainly unique. I think if you were to ask me at 40 years old, would I be working for a design platform? I'd say most likely not. My entire career, for the most part, had been centered around oil and gas. I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. That's kind of what you did there. Everything from out of high school to roughnecking on the rigs, then going to school, and then figuring once I went to school, I would just probably land back in oil and gas. So my career somewhat started there. I was actually primarily with a mining company because at the time jobs were a little scarce in that industry. And so the next closest thing I thought that was relatable was drilling. And so we were manufacturing drilling equipment. So I was there for about 4 years, and then moved over to a large cap midstream company where I spent the best part of 10 years, I think, almost at there being on the procurement side of the business. And procurement was a tough one for me. I always wanted to have it as a foot in the door and maybe move more to the commercial side because I really liked the revenue generation. I wanted to be on the front lines of how the business was making money. And just through ups and downs, unfortunately, I never got there. But I got to a point where I was burnt out. Oil and gas could take a lot out of you. I wasn't a petroleum engineer. That typically helps in that industry, especially from a growth standpoint. And so um, I sort of had this reflection and that I needed to completely change my direction and wanted to move more towards a sales facing job. I thought, software is not something I knew a lot about, but my wife was in tech. She really encouraged me to do it. And I ended up, instead of doing a full career shift, it was a soft landing into an oil and gas tech startup. So it seemed natural. I had the industry experience, and now I was going to go learn the software side of the business. So ended up at a small oil and gas startup out of Denver for a few years. And that's where I sort of parlayed um, being in sales to my first experience in business development and partnerships. And so I was there running that team for a little bit of time before moving to another oil and gas startup back into midstream, and because somehow I can't get away from it. And that was it was a really great job, great experience. But um, when this opportunity at Ceros came up, it was pretty serendipitous, actually. The company I was at was looking to go for a series round of funding, and we were small. And I was just trying to do some due diligence to help where I can, like what needs to be in place. I mean, we have really smart people there, and so I just started going through, to be all things, my network on LinkedIn, and I came across who's now my boss at Ceros, and I just wanted to pick up the call with him because he'd been at Ceros for so long, and just say like, hey, man, like what did you have to go through to get there? Like, I feel like we're not really prepared. We are prepared, but there's things going through, and so we actually had a couple conversations, and he sort of parlayed that into, hey, I think you'd be a really good fit over here. And there was this partnerships, vice president of partnerships role at Ceros, really small team, and applied for the job. I guess it came down to me and another guy, and I was able to get it. And since then, it's been quite a growth journey, moving from oil and gas into, you know, working with some of the largest social media players out there, and growing out a partner program at Ceros over the short time I've been there. So, yeah, very unconventional, I would say, but you know, building off of my experience and desire to be in revenue generation, sales, forward-facing aspects of the business, it's been great.
That's awesome. And I think I've seen the videos online, but for those who haven't, like, could you tell us a little bit more about what roughnecking is?
Oh yeah, sure. So you're sitting on top of an oil platform, drilling a hole for what will eventually turn into an oil well. Um, and I was really young at the time. I think I was 18 or 19, in northern Canada, so middle of nowhere, -40, the whole thing. Guys do it every day. Incredibly tough job. I mean, talk about learning a lot about yourself early on, and learning to, develop a stiff upper lip at that point. So yeah, I mean, you're moving tons and tons of pipe up and down, the Earth's crust to try and make a hole good enough to, suck some dino juice out of the ground. Really, at the end of the day, is all we're doing. So it was awesome though. Yeah, really tough job though.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but yeah,
amazing. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've seen a bunch of those videos online of people doing that work, and it looks hard work, dangerous. I think so. My dad was in construction. I grew up doing construction
sure.
when I was a kid. Not as hard or dangerous, by the looks of it, to be honest. But I think it really, like, when you've done work like that as a kid, it really preps you for appreciating how nice work like this is. The,
Yeah.
the stuff that we get to do today, I feel very fortunate to do because I've done work like that, and I know what, like, really really hard work is. Not to say that these jobs are easy, but just, like, relatively very
No,
comfortable in
100%.
comparison.
For sure. I think it was enough to inspire me. I had no intention really of going to college and out of high school. Certainly inspired me to maybe move more in that direction. So I can, sometimes you have to know what you don't want to do
Yeah.
to figure out what you do want to do. And I think after enough time throwing tongs on an oil rig, I knew I didn't want to do that forever.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. And so, I mean, I think for a lot of people, procurement is a total black box, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've been in a
Yeah.
direct sales role. My wife is like a great salesperson. She also works in tech as well. Sounds like same with your wife. Um,
Yeah.
like, obviously today's about partnerships, but I'd love to talk a little bit
Hmm.
about the procurement world. It's given that you spent a good
Sure.
amount of time there. Like, I know that for some procurement roles, like, you're incentivized to reduce costs, like, where you
Hmm.
can. You like, can you tell us a little bit about how that role works? I would just love to see the other side of the coin.
Yeah, it's actually funny you say that. I describe myself as a recovering procurement junkie. Because I mean I lived it for so long, and you just know some things you're really fit for and some things you aren't fit for. And like I said, like, I really wanted to do well on the role, but to be honest, like, I wa- it is a bit of a black box. Like,
Hmm.
there's not a lot of autonomy. There's not a lot of room for creativity. It's really, at the end of the day, like, this is how much money you have to save, or we're reducing budgets, or this is how much budget we have, and you have to fall in here, and there's deadlines to meet to get there. And it's just not very flexible. And so, um, I mean, I was responsible at one point in one of our bigger years for one of our largest strategic partners. I was a strategic sourcing manager, and I think upwards of our spend was, quarter of $1 billion, if not more. We were in a big
Wow.
build year, and so that was exciting, right? You're dealing with a lot of things going on, lots of projects, but um, you sort of catch yourself in situations of, you're trying your hardest to get the job done, but at the end of the day, you don't have any full authority to make those calls. You're still relying on others. So you can be doing all this work, and they can just come in and say, like, nope, that's not the case. We need the contract signed by X. Oh, but I've sourced all these materials at a far better rate. Don't care. Need these guys for some other reason, right? So it's a good way to learn operationally how the business works if you're really paying attention. But it is like, you know, you're at times feeling like you're just taking orders and not really, like, um, really being able to move the needle. And the thing is, it's so valuable to an organization, but it's not valued the same way as revenue generation. Because the analogy I go back to is, you'll chase the bag of money at the end of the haul, right?
Hmm.
Like, you can come in and say, I just saved you guys 20 million bucks. They're like, I don't know, I don't really see it. But like, someone on a project build can be like, hey, if we build this project, there's 20 million bucks in revenue. And so what are they going to chase? The bag of money at the end of the haul. The bag of money they don't see is not as valuable as the bag of money they do see. And so there's still a bag of money you're saving for that company, but value wise, it's not looked at the same way.
Yeah,
And
and
that's where it always falls flat. And that's where it's really hard and really challenging. Because they are, like think about any sort of like large retail business. Anytime you go shopping, like you walk into any Walmart, like what could you think of the size of the procurement organization at those places? Like it's no different in oil and gas when you're trying to do it with, you know, steel, you know, milled pipe, valves, the whole thing, contract work, construction labor, the whole thing. And all you're trying to do is grind as much savings out of it as you can. And it's just not valued the same way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Even so, I've sold software, also bought software, and in both
Yeah.
scenarios, you kind of almost keep the procurement team at like somewhat of a distance. I think, which is
Hmm.
is definitely like not as effective as if you kind of brought them into the fold. Like
For sure.
what like recommendations would you have for salespeople or partnerships people that are trying to navigate like a big deal? Like that is a gigantic deal, right? Like I think
Yeah. Yeah.
most of us could dream of doing a deal that big in our careers. Like if navigating a giant deal like that, like what recommendations would you have for people working with the procurement team?
Yeah, that's funny you asked that. So, just as a sort of precursor to the answer, I'm on one of the partnership leaders roundtables where we sit together, and every time it comes up, someone's talking about we're stuck in procurement, and I'm like, well, have you thought of this? And then like, hey, is your background in procurement? I'm like, yeah, I've been on the other side of the table, so I feel now I'm getting more value out of my opinion being so far away from it than when I actually was in it, which is kind of ironic. Um, so, I mean, the challenge is like one, you need to be exceptionally organized. You need to be, you, I would say you can't really have anything like left up to chance. And there is a level, there's unfortunately, we like to think there's a balance of art and science, and there's just not so much art in dealing with procurement as there is science. And, you know, for a lot of people, it does go to the lowest bid, right? And that's maybe not the highest value, right? Like there's value outside the proxy of money when it comes to things, right? And
Mm,
that's not how it's looked at in procurement, especially when the objectives are to cost avoid, cost save, reduce lead times, whatever that is.
yeah.
So being being on the sales side, I met with so many salespeople across a lot of in the same industry, but from so many different companies, and the ones that resonated with me the most were the ones that were actually like the most prepared. It's easy to be in sales and be unprepared. We all know sales junkies who are just sales lifers who just sort of take it for granted and pat themselves on the back in a good economy and are always wondering why they're at a new company in a bad one, right? So like there's a level of professionalism to be there, but there is also a level of like trying to personify the situation, finding out what they are measured against and to help that. And procurements individuals don't like to give that up easily because they feel like they're saying stuff they shouldn't. There's this like poker face you're supposed to have the entire time. And unfortunately, like if I could tell that to anyone else in procurement, like that is so detrimental to actually getting the work done and actually driving value. If I could just like go back and teach people in procurement, like, no, it's okay to be transparent. It's okay to be real. Like, especially if you're working with people you would consider to partner with, or you consider to be like a strategic vendor or supplier. Like, you know, I had a boss who was pretty crass, but he always said, like, with the highest strategic partners, is like, you're no longer sleeping together, you're married. So you have to have these conversations. And so if you can build that rapport to get there, I think that would help anyone in sales really sort of like chip away at the armor that is procurement. They don't like to give things up. And that's really hard. But I think if you can find some genuine um, like if you act as a genuine individual and you can really try to get to know them, that's the way it really works. Like the easy side of procurement is this, right? Like either an RFP comes out and you're a part of the bid, then you need to be set up as a vendor, and that takes a long time through the legal process, and you're really not going to be able to do much to expedite that, right? Like vendor setups at large cap companies, like yeah, they can take 8 to 12 months, right? You're just trying to run through a contract, right? So like those are all the standard aspects of it. But to really make yourself set up against the rest is to figure out what not only the program is incentivized by, but what the individual is and what motivates them. And if you can make them look like a hero, you're gonna get them every time.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that I don't know if there's like there's lots of sales training companies. Like I've gone
Hmm.
some through some amazing sales training, force management, proactive selling by Skip Miller, some really good ones.
Yeah.
But I there is definitely some that I've never done anything that's like, hey, here's how to work with the procurement team. There's
Hmm.
probably like a course in that somewhere in your distant future. If you decide you want to be a content creator, I think that there's something in that that people would probably be quite interested in seeing how the other side of it all works.
That's a good idea. I haven't thought of it that way. Like I said, I still get PTSD, so sometimes I
Yeah.
try my best to forget about it. But I haven't talked about it in months or years, and I feel you asking me the questions like, oh yeah, I remember that now.
That's
Okay,
amazing.
you know,
Yeah, that's
lived it
amazing.
hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, so I like the what I'm really enjoying and I like want to dig into more is this kind of journey through like these kind of career
Yeah.
changes and like so you then kind of went into more of a tech function. And so I'd love to just
Hmm.
hear about like as you moved into a tech company, like what at least my experience has been like the way that these businesses work, actually a lot of the skills and behaviors and everything are quite similar, but just like the language that you need to use changes. Like I talked
Hmm.
to my sister's like like assistant head teacher at a school in the UK, and like the way that they run the school is really similar to how we run a startup, but just like the terms we use and the way that we describe things is like totally different. So she would feel like it's very foreign, even though it's just the language is different, but they're still doing similar types of meetings and similar types of planning. And like we're all humans after all. Like it would be really
Yeah.
interesting to hear like as you kind of made that transition to working in tech, like what were some of the things that you had to like learn that were new, or some of the things that you had to kind of translate from that old language to tech?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you make a really good point, Ty. It's actually one of the things that um, speaking the language means you have experience, right? Like you can have a foundation of experience, but if you don't know how to speak to it the right way, so your audience it resonates with your audience who is speaking that language, you're you're going to be overlooked. And I'll tell you, like, I probably before I landed my first transition job into oil and gas tech, like I probably had 10 to 15 interviews that fell completely flat, and it's just because I I didn't get it. Like I could understand from the business function, operationally, strategy, no problem. But to just speak the language was so hard. So fortunately, I had my wife, who's been an incredible influence on me for this, and really like the only reason I'm pretty much where I am today from this is because we'd come home and I'd hear her talk, and I'd be like, and then I would sort of repeat the same thing back, and she'd be like, "No, we were kind of talking the same thing, but because of the language I wasn't using, the terms I wasn't using, she's like, no, you're not getting it." And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm getting this. And she's like, then you have to say it like this.
Mm.
And so actually, I'm still, one was going into software, startup, sales, tech. That was another thing. And then talking product, like I still, I still put time aside a week to just make sure I'm speaking the right language, right? Like that's still a hard thing for me to do. And it's funny because you can sometimes catch people in the industry. Like you can tell when someone knows what an integration is and someone doesn't, and they'll just throw the word out there, right? Like, or when someone uses API, and do you really understand what that means? Like you're just saying it because you think that's the way, that's the bridge to connect everything. It's still things I come across, and so our leadership and our CEO specifically is really product focused. I mean, he's tremendously sales oriented as well, but knows product so well, and he's a creative. He's a very creative individual. He's a creator, and so like now I'm trying to speak product with him and speak in a creative language so he understands from a design standpoint, and like I'm still having to catch up on that stuff, right? And I think it's just a constant journey. Like it comes naturally to people who have been in the industry for a really long period of time. I have, been in software tech and sales, for 5 years now, maybe. And, my whole background was construction, oil, and gas. So it's one thing I really try to tell people when they're trying to make that transition is like really learn the terminology, understand it. The business side of it is the same sort of business strategy as anywhere: reduce costs, make money, right? Like that's all you're trying to do: grow, scale, the whole thing. But if you can really understand the terminology and the language well, like I think it positions yourself in a much better space. So, and it's a constant working thing for me.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. And I'd love to dig into it a little bit more because I think a lot of people are excited about making kind of a transition like you have, or, I
Sure.
have as well. And, it sounds like we both married well, which is really helpful. That's always,
It
that,
helps. That's
that's
a
the
good
top tip. Yeah.
recommendation
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. 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 So that definitely helps. But like, what it sounds like, having conversations with people that know this stuff and being
Yeah.
vulnerable enough to say, hey, am I getting it, and like repeating it
Yeah.
back, and like and being receptive when people say that maybe you're not getting it. Like, what other tips would you have for people that are kind of trying to learn the language of an in industry they're interested in moving into?
Yeah. Big proponent of reading and just finding publications that you can, rely on. I mean, I think what you've done with partnership leaders is phenomenal from that standpoint because you brought together an entire ecosystem of individuals from different industries, and it's made for a very safe spot to share those things. So if you have access to those resources that are either free or affordable, like huge proponent of that. And then um, take as many non-threatening conversations as you can. Like not everything has to be a conversation where you hope someone's going to give you a job at the end of the day. And like be sure to get with people who either can see you're being vulnerable, trying to learn, you are human, all those important things that come from like really like setting a new foundation for yourself and a new standard to grow upon. Like everything else is built up to that point. Now you're going to jump into something you don't know. Like, okay, hold on to all that, but then everything north of that is huge. So you talk to people who will understand that as well, and really try and honestly like focus on your network. Even like they don't have to be, if someone's trying to make a transition into tech from another industry that isn't tech oriented, um, ask them more about their job. Like, just you don't have to. Not everything has to be so hyper focused on where you need to get. It's hyper focused on getting in front of people with experience, and then being able to build your own story on that. And that was really helpful to me when I took that pressure off of myself to be like, I want to talk to that guy because they might be hiring there and I know him and he can get me a job. Like when I started just asking questions, all of a sudden it started to unfold. And when the opportunity then presented itself, oh, I started to speak the language. I started to ask questions I didn't ask before. I was interested more in fundamentally how companies did business as opposed to how they made money. Like all those things just start to like, build a recipe, I guess, for yourself in
Yeah.
your pursuit of growth. That's what I would have. I think I would have saved myself a lot of time if I wasn't so focused on getting out of procurement and getting into a sales job in software. I would have just had some more qualifying conversations to build my own knowledge base, to learn more, and then to finally get where I would have saved myself. Like maybe I would have cut the 15 interviews I had to have and fail at in half. Right? Who knows?
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like that's exactly how you ended up in your role today, was by having one of those more casual conversations and it kind of
Very
turning
much so.
into something. Yeah, it's amazing how that can work out. If you came into that conversation like, "Hey, I want a job," that person probably
Yeah.
would have been like, "Oh, this is not the person for the job," But the
Yeah,
fact that
go
you
apply online through our portal and we'll see if someone gets back to you.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's how it would have been.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, totally. And so because I worked in for like after working in construction as a kid, like summers and weekends and like any basically that's like how I got my allowance from my dad. And then even like with like doing construction work afterwards as well. I worked in finance for 5 years, and I got an interview at a tech company, a company called Optimizely. And
Oh yeah.
I felt very fortunate because I still almost have a little bit of PTSD from this interview, because I like turned up. I'd been working in finance, so I had a suit and a tie. And I remember
Yep.
looking in the window, and everyone was in like shorts, t-shirts, hoodies, and I was like, okay, well, I better take off the tie. Like I
Hmm.
probably don't need the tie. I remember putting the tie in my pocket. I was like, okay, I probably don't need that. And then being in the
For sure.
interview and just getting like one guy in particular, Stephen Heisenhout, who he's a good friend and an awesome guy. I remember him grilling me particularly hard in the interview on like, okay, well, like what does HTML mean and what does it do and what's like CSS and JavaScript and like how
Hmm.
does JavaScript interact with the website, and like what does that and I remember being like, wow, I'd been like online and on like internet forums for tech for a little while and like reading a lot of
Hmm.
books and things like that. And I remember having like okay answer and him even saying, that was an okay answer, like not a very good one. And him knowing, hey, I'm not from the tech space, but like at least having a base level understanding enough where, not just to your point around APIs, not being able to just say, oh yeah, like well, okay, a high level, I understand what an API does, but okay, like what does
Yeah.
that mean? And like, how does it, like, being able to go a couple of levels deeper, um, I think really, really helped me out. And if I wouldn't have got that job, I have no idea what I would be doing now. That was like really
For sure.
the catalyst in the journey for me into tech. And so I feel he gave me a pretty hard time in that interview, but I also feel very appreciative that he kind of gave me the green light at the end because he
Definitely.
is definitely influential in the process.
No, that's great. And you need that too, right? I think that comes back to like when you're speaking to people too, you get a true test of their character, right? Like you want to you want to hire learners. Experience really matters, right? And if you have a breadth of experience, it typically means you're a good learner. And
Hmm.
so, better than to have someone come in who's really rigid, might be able to speak everything. Those are incredibly valuable people and resources as well. But at the end of the day, like the best carryover is an individual learner. Are they morbidly curious to know more? And then you don't really have to do much from a management standpoint other than just really guide.
Yeah,
Right?
I
It's,
love that.
it's, it's hugely valuable.
Yeah, so that's the other tip is like be curious, be a learner. I think you can really tell when someone's a lifelong learner and they're the
Hmm.
best people, aren't they? It's like
Yeah.
they're always the most enjoyable people. Like they could be the smartest, most interesting person in the room, and they're the one asking other people questions, and like trying to
Exactly.
making other people feel good. They're the best people to be around. And so, like now what you're doing today, is there, I think kind of a roughly similar space to where I was at Optimizely as well back in the day. So tell us a little bit about the business and the partners that you work with and the partner program, because obviously you've then made the transition now into from sales into partnerships, and I'd love to dig into your role there and the expectations of it, but just start with like a high level, the company, the product, the types of partners that you work with.
Yeah, of course. So Ceros, we're a cloud-based design platform, really intended for creatives and designers to really create the most immersive, experiential online content they can. So what we do really well is allow a designer to use the platform as a studio and create their piece of content or collateral or experience or whichever you want to label it as, and then publish it instantly without any dev resources or code required to do so. So what it's really nice about it is it keeps whatever you're going to create to engage your audience in the hands of the creative and allows them to actually dictate what that experience should look like. And so there's no back and forth with dev or code limitations to say, I have an idea of how I want this to look. I need it to come in from the right. And dev's like, sorry, got to come in from the left. Things like that. We've eliminated that friction, and we've done very well at it. Company's been in business over 10 years now, pushing almost 1,000 clients, I think, coming into this year, or
Wow.
900, massive growth, and had a really, really strong traditional go-to-market strategy. And the reason the role I came into was open was there were two individuals on the team really just trying to figure out partnerships, how to figure out non-traditional go-to-market, like what can we do outside of what the studio is capable of doing. And I think there was a bit of pressure to say, hey, like partnerships is really picking up, it's really becoming a part of what's making companies valuable, and we really need to grow that. And so I came in to join this team of two, and clean slate. It was, we had a couple partners we integrated with, that was just built out of necessity for clients, but no real scalable format and no real strategy around how we're going to pick that apart. So what we had to do is really evaluate how our clients are using Ceros in our studio to engage their audience, what sort of collateral content they're producing, and say, cool, how do we get that in the hands of partners, help it take it and open it up to their market? Because it isn't something as easy as signing up a reseller as a partner. Like it takes our sales team almost 12 months to be fully ramped because it is a
Mm.
very strong, robust, complex product. So you really want to be able to have someone speak to it effectively. And passing that over to just a reseller is, you throw the keys over to the fence to someone who doesn't know how to drive, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're just not going to do that. So we had to really focus on how that was going to look. So what we were able to do and what we have done is, we want Ceros in the studio to be whatever you can imagine and create from an online experience side of things, but also there's productizing that, right? Like you don't want to be defined by the fact that, you can create killer sales collateral in there. Because then people are like, oh, you're the company that does sales decks. Like, no, we're so much more than that. Oh, you're the company that does landing pages. No, we're so much more than that, right? So we started to really focus on, okay, we're not going to turn this into some sort of reseller or OEM anytime soon. What we're looking at primarily is like, let's look at how we've productized some of these things, how that would be valuable to partners and how that would be valuable to their market and their audience, and take that to them and say, hey, I think there's something really here tangible to go after. So sales enablement partners is a big priority for us. DAMs is a big priority for us. Social media channel partners is our largest one, because we're able to productize individual experiences into ad experiences that allow brands and advertisers and marketers to take whatever they want to advertise, build it in Ceros, and then post it and host it on a social media platform. So from sales enablement and DAMs, now we're really trying to explore how do we do this with CMSs, right? Like how do we
Mm.
take, what behind the scenes is and take what we do as forward facing collateral to the audience and see what sort of connections we can make from there. So we're starting to explore that more. And then really figuring out, I think, from a standpoint of like what other channels do we need to go after, or what other verticals does that look like given what we're capable of doing now from a production standpoint and an end result standpoint. So it's been a wild, like there's a lot, right? Like you kind of want to be able to do everything, but then there could be also limitations in the software itself and limitations in the architecture to do things that we thought could be easily done. But what we have been able to do is grow this team of mine now that was three when I started last April to seven now, to really hyper focus on, okay, learn what our clients are using us for, like really dive into that. What other platforms are they using for? Is there parity in connecting the two together? Okay, if there is, then maybe we should have a conversation there. Run plenty of account mapping exercises to give us just an idea of where we sit relative to some of these other big software companies and big tech companies, and see, okay, what is it that we've been able to do today that would add value, that doesn't cannibalize sales, that we can non-traditionally go to market, but truly as partners going to market, not just, you know, picking one up and trying to pass it off as your own as a reseller or ISV or something like that. Like we're starting to explore that further. So
That's
that's
awesome.
how we're building the program. It's still very much in its infancy, but we've certainly made a ton of traction this year in actually signing partner agreements and having, label partners we now need to do co-marketing with so people are aware. It's been fun. It's been challenging. You know, we're it's the company's in a really exciting spot. We're about to do a really big release at the end of September called The Power of Creativity, that for anyone listening on this should join that virtual event. You're going to
Hmm.
be blown away. We're really excited to see what that looks like. And that's going to open up other opportunities for our partnerships team as well, because we'll have other products, and then we'll be able to explore, you know, partnerships for product specifics. Like we did that with our Markup IO product right now. We really put a heavy partner focus on agencies acting as resellers for Markup, because it's something that has a very low barrier to entry. Users get it very simply, and organically it grew by itself without any marketing to a massive user base. So it seemed like a natural fit, right? And so that's what we're going to continue to explore and do as best we can.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'd love to talk about some of these partners, because I mean, especially the social platforms,
Mhm.
you're like you've got Snapchat as a partner, you've got you've got HubSpot as a partner, Getty
Mhm.
as a partner, these huge big companies.
Yeah.
Like, could you tell us about one that you're like successfully kind of collaborating with or working with, like how that relationship works?
Yeah, I mean, the one there that I think is the easiest to explain, that we're partners with, is Pinterest from a social
Hmm.
media standpoint. That one,
Hmm.
just so everyone understands how that partnership works, is, Pinterest, we're considered a creative partner for Pinterest. So there's a few other platforms that work inside this team at Pinterest that goes to market with their sales team to um, uh, pursue brands for ad experiences. So they'll go to a brand and say, "Hey, you should advertise on Pinterest. We're doing this. We have a media campaign that goes about this with a spend. And oh, by the way, we'll connect you with some pretty powerful experiential content to create this pretty amazing ad experience." And so, I mean, we've done, I think, year over year growth was something like, I want to say, I don't know, 150, 200% last year, so, or almost
Wow.
300% last year, from 2020 to 2021. And a lot of that had to do with that really strong partner managers who were a really strong partner manager who was able to cultivate that relationship really well. But what we do from that standpoint is we're just the platform that hosts the ad experience. We're introduced by the sales individual over there at Pinterest to the agency or brand looking to run a campaign. And then they work with our production team and, really come up with, they really create what that campaign would look like or what that experience wants to look like. And they've done some really powerful things. And it's a testament to the software that allows them to do that, right? Like, it's incredibly remarkable how much we engage an audience so much more than you would with static content.
Hmm.
And so we do this on just an individual project basis. So it's a project model strategy that seemed to work really well for us.
That's
And
amazing.
does so because we have a really cool production partner, a company called Rhapsody, that does a lot of our creative work for us. And we leverage them to explore different ways we can go to market with that model specifically, because that model has proven to be successful. And we think we can do it with other companies as well, where they can sit there and say, our audience wants this. And great, well, would you like to buy that on a per project basis? We can do that. You want to bundle that up over a given period of time? Great, we can move that into a bundled experience and book it accordingly. And so we're really trying to leverage that to see where we can go with it.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, so the core tenets, I think, of having like being a preferred partner to a company like this, I think there's like three things,
Mhm.
right? There's like you do need to positively impact their business, which of course your product does. Like if ads
Mhm.
perform better, that's a great outcome for the Pinterest team, right?
Right.
You also have to have a product that's going to make their customers happy and successful. But
Yeah.
you also have to be really like I say like the easiest partner to work with, right? Which means that like they trust you, but also you're easy to communicate with, like you're
Right.
transparent, like you're present, the whole thing. Like what do you think that your partner manager did on that? Like whether it's easiest to work with or the best to work with or whatever. Like what do
Mhm.
you think your partner manager did so well with Pinterest that kind of allowed you to be in that position with them?
Uh, Very simply, Pinterest is very professional and organized, and they know a lot of what people want to work with them. So we have to have someone who's very professional, very organized, do that. And so our the woman running that program, she's no longer with us, unfortunately, but she was exactly that. Like there wasn't anything that she missed, and subsequently, um, her counterpart that's now filled the role is in the same position. They just don't miss things, and it's reading your room and reading your audience, right? Like we're talking about, it's a lot of money that people are throwing at these campaigns. Like media spend is expensive,
Mm-hmm.
right? And conversions are key, and results are critical, and capturing your audience is everything. So if we remember those as the tenants, like make sure you're absolutely doing all of the work behind the scenes to support that and to make
Yeah.
sure that they see you're executing on it. And we hold ourselves to a high standard that way. Like we're very competitive. We're a very competitive team. We're a very creative team. There's a ton of autonomy on my team, which helps. And a lot of that comes to do with just sort of the ethos of Ceros as a whole. Like we find a way, we give a shit, we wear our chicken suits, creativity matters, and stop there. That's what matters. So we promote that.
Mm.
And I think people who come into our company and our organization, it can give them a little bit of angst if they're not from Ceros, because they're like, wait a sec, like, what do you mean I can go and try this? I want you to try that. That sounds like a really good idea. You have the autonomy to do it. You have the autonomy to fail fast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like figure it out. Get the conversations in place. We have a business to grow on our own here for this team, and please remember, we are just growing this now. This isn't a partnership organization with 50 plus partners and
Mm-hmm.
1,000 partners like you have at Deal, right? Like we don't have that many yet, and we probably won't ever get to that amount. We may with other products, but so we need to be very methodical, strategic, and understand what our limitations are as a platform and what we can do, but also know where to elevate and execute on that. And it's a testament to the company, but it's testament to the team too. I
Yeah.
think they all feel that way. I hope they all feel that way. I try and drive it home every week.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's also, yeah, you might start getting to that volume with the creative agencies, like you described at some point. It's like that's
Yeah,
there's a few of them around. I think
a few.
at Optimizely we had, I want to say, like in the region of 300 like digital agency partners, something in
Yeah,
that region. At Deal right now we have almost 3,000 registered partners. It's just
crazy.
a gigantic space. Like employment globally, there's a lot of
Yeah,
people that are involved in that process, whether it's recruiting, HR, tax, legal,
totally.
compliance, getting people visas, helping people relocate. Like the service partner section just in itself is massive, let alone all of our integration partners and everything else. It's definitely like a scale of magnitude yeah, from
Sure.
significantly larger than like Amplitude or Optimizely, but a fun one to work on. Well, I mean, I could talk to you about this stuff all day. Honestly, I think I could spend another 2 hours digging into just the Pinterest relationship. But
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you, like, what's something that you've learned recently that you'd like to share with the audience that are listening today?
That's a good question. And I've been thinking a lot about that actually. And the, I think the one thing I've really tried to work on lately and it's really helped is like, and it's sort of evolved from this. Like, I always tried to fit in a box, and I always tried to fit in like, hey, if I'm trying to get this job, they probably want this type of person. And when I threw that out the window and really started to like focus on that as a way I wanted to live my life, like unapologetically be yourself for all of your faults and all of your qualities. Um, it's terrifying, first of all, because all of a sudden you feel like, where am I going to land? Where I'm going to end up? But it's incredibly rewarding, and it's actually something you can continue to build upon because you care about the right things at that point. And it took me way too long to learn that. Way too long. I wasted way too much time trying to fit into, I'm an oil and gas guy. I'm a procurement guy. Like, I'm never going to be a sales guy because I talk to sales guys all the time and they're just okay. And then I was like, hold on, like, no, I am a sales guy and I'm not an oil and gas guy. And, just all these things started to open up. And then you have your terrible moment of like, well, who the hell am I? But you also sort of connect with yourself a little bit, and it carries on to so many other things. So
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the things I learned. I say it recently because it's only really, I think it's impactful, and like it's only been within the past year and a half. I really do. Like, I mean, and in my life, when I've been the same person my life, like it took me to almost 38, 39 to just be myself.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I think, if you're spending, I think we all work quite a lot, right? If we can be honest
Yeah.
about that, we work a decent amount. And if you're spending all of that time not being yourself, and
Yeah.
like not representing your true self to your colleagues, like I think, yeah, that's a tough life to live. So it's so awesome to hear, and I think that people can take that away. That's a great life lesson. I think some good
It's
wisdom there.
easy to say. Yeah, no, I would agree. It's easy to say. Like people are always going to tell you to be yourself, but like you've got to let go of everything to just accept that that's who you are and that's who you want to be. And like it builds on stuff what you want from your career, who you want to be working with, where you want to work, what you want to be doing. It comes as a part of that. So yeah, I know it sounds a little hokey pokey, and every teacher's told you to just be yourself, but like there's one thing to say it and there's one thing to do it.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. That's such a great way to end this conversation. So, Tom, thank you so much. It's been awesome learning about your journey. And I know that there's hundreds of people in our open to work community that are going to be really interested to learn about this transition. I'm going to send this recording over to my sister. She's really interested in like the tech world, and like a transition one day into working in tech. And so I think that there's so much insight in here for folks, and so really appreciate you sharing that with us and really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, Ty, thanks so much. Really pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, I look forward to continuing to speak with people who want to do that. Who knows, maybe in 3 years I'm transitioning out of tech into something else I didn't know, right? But yeah, it's been crazy, but thanks again, and an absolute pleasure, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. See ya.